Welcome to the Piston Fanatic. I am your host, Dave Dalton, and I'm excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I have been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. I've also been a varsity basketball coach of a very successful program in northern Michigan. Currently, my daughter and I are coaching one of the best AAU teams in the country. Well, Piston fans, it happened. Dwane Casey is going to transition into the front office and step down as the head coach of our Detroit Pistons. So this has been something that I have speculated about for quite some time now, and especially I said after the meeting that he had with Tom Gores after the Pacers game 2 games ago that the writing was on the wall. So at that time, after he met with Gores, Casey said that he would like to return but would do whatever was best for the organization. And he also said there's a lot of basketball left in me. So all that points to you to tell you that he wanted to still coach. And so he did come out and say after the game today that it's been a great 44 years where he's been a coach. And he said, Tom has given me the opportunity to move into the front office. And he's excited about that. And so that is cool because, again, I've said this repeatedly. Coach Casey is obviously a good man and he knows basketball, but it is time to turn the page for our Detroit Pistons to get somebody to infuse some new energy and life into our program, somebody that may be more innovative defensively and offensively. But he said that he's excited about it, and it was totally my decision, and he appreciated Tom Gores, and it's been known that he had a good relationship with the owner, Tom Gores. But to say that I don't know, he kind of made it sound like he had the choice of continuing to coach, and I don't believe that for a minute. I think that he was given the opportunity to choose whether he wanted the front office job or not. And so I think it'll be great. At his age, he still does have a lot of basketball in him. But just like John Beeline, I mean, if you watch Coach Beeline out on the court when he works with the players in the player development, he has a fire inside of him, and he is intense, and he is passionate. You can just tell by every movement and every interaction with the players. And I think that Coach Casey will still have that. And, you know, I think this is a great job for somebody to want to take. I think that there should be lots of coaches that would be jumping at the opportunity to coach our Detroit Pistons. And that's not been that way. I can't say that would have even been that way for a long time. For at least 15 years, I can't believe that people wouldn't want. And this is a team, you know, that's won only like 60 games in the last 3 years. How can that be a good job? But I can tell you why. It's because we have some very talented players. We have cap space. We have a high pick, and we have Cade Cunningham. And I really do believe that coaches, you know, I'm a coach. I would love to have somebody, a leader on my team like Cade Cunningham. Also, Coach Casey, thank you for all you've done. He really truly has created a culture, and along with Troy Weaver, and along with Cade Cunningham and Isaiah Stewart, and you know even Bojan Bogdanovic, that we have a really good culture on our team, and you can just tell by the way the players talk and interact. You never ever hear rumors about inner fighting, and like there's with the Minnesota. With Rudy Gobert today, he got in a fight with some of his teammates, and then there was another team that with I think the Clippers, where Bones Highland got into a spat in a fight with a teammate. So there's not a good culture everywhere, but our Pistons have, and again, Coach Casey has been a big part of that. So here we go forward. There's going to be so much talk and speculation about who is going to be the next coach. And Woj has tweeted out, that Charles Lee, the assistant, I talked about him at a prior podcast. I thought he would be a good option. Raptors assistant Adrian Griffin, who is AJ Griffin, that's a rookie with the Atlanta Hawks, and he was a former NBA player. Emi Udoka, and we know he was the head coach for the Boston Celtics last year, and Miami Heat assistant Chris Quinn. There have also been a couple guys that were involved at Oklahoma City when Troy was there, and so he has knows those guys real well, and so we're going to talk about some of those people. And we know Troy he likes to find people that he has a relationship with. So even, he was a good friend with somebody that was the coach for Isaiah Stewart. And so that's why he was all in on Isaiah Stewart. And even Buddy Boeheim, he was Jim Boeheim's assistant at Syracuse forever ago, and he still, went out and got Buddy. And then he also had, with Hami, Hami was at Oklahoma City when he was there, and so he had a relationship, and he liked Hami, and so that's led to him being part of our team. His son played AAU basketball with Luca Garza, and so he got to know him a little bit. So we drafted him in the second round. Anyway, he's just shown out that he does attracted to people that he has prior relationships with. So that doesn't guarantee anything. I do completely believe that he will do his due diligence. Steven Silas just got let go from Houston, and I'm sure there will be other coaching changes. And so that means that there's going to be some competition for who gets the best guy. But this will be a huge decision for our program going forward. So hopefully he nails it. And there has been, again, I talked about on podcasts, one of the reasons I am optimistic that we get a new coach and it will help to promote and our turnaround. Will Hardy, the 34-year-old coach, that he's so young at Utah, but he's done a phenomenal job and been very successful. Joe Mazzulla, this is his first year taking over for Emi Udoka, and he's done a great job with the Boston Celtics. Jamal Mosley, Orlando's experienced a big improvement, and he's a new young coach. And of course, Oklahoma City, Mark Dagnott, he has been terrific there and got that program turned around. So let's start talking about some of the people that were mentioned. Chris Quinn is 40 years old. He was a former player and assistant. He's still an assistant with Miami Heat. And when Spoelstra had to miss some games, he was left in charge of the team. So Jonas Haslin, who's played there for over 20 years, he said that he's a lot like Spo, and that and he's got every base covered. He said he's knowledgeable, he's experienced, he's great with relationships, and he's been involved in player development. So that's Chris Quinn, assistant at Miami, and Josh Longstaff. He's 40. He's an assistant with the Bulls. He has lots of experience. He was in player development. But he started out in Oklahoma City when Troy Weaver was there. He was a video analyst and worked in player development. And later he was promoted to an assistant, but he's been player development coach with the Knicks. He's been assistant with the Bucks, and he's currently an assistant with the Chicago Bulls. So he has lots of experience, but Troy has knowledge of him, and he's one of those players like those coaches like we're seeing in the NBA that started out as a video guy and that broke down videotapes, and they just worked their way up. So Troy had another guy, Brian Keefe, that he's been an assistant for 11 seasons. 7 years he was with Oklahoma City, and he started out with 2 seasons with the Spurs, and he got a ring working with the Spurs. And Sam Presti, that is the general manager at Oklahoma City, he was the assistant for the Spurs when Brian Keefe was there. And so he worked in player development. He was there for Oklahoma City as player development coach and helped develop Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. So those are some pretty good names to have on your resume. And not that they would have been great coaches anyway. But another thing about Brian Keefe is when he was with the Thunder in 2010, he was the defensive coordinator. And so now teams sort of have that. Like in football, they have an offensive and defensive coordinator. But there are certain coaches now on most staffs that are assigned. And we certainly need to get a coach who has the ability to coach defense and get our players to improve on defense, because that's a great area that we really struggled with. He was also, in 2016, he was the Lakers defensive coordinator when Luke Walton was there. He also was player development there and worked with Brandon Ingram and some of their other young players, but he helped transform their defense. It was when he took over running the defense, they were 30th, which is last in the NBA, and they improved to 12th under his direction or help. So, but he was at Oklahoma City with Billy Donovan and led the defense there for Billy Donovan, and then he ended up recently he's been a coach for the Nets. So, those are some guys along with, like I said, Charles Lee. I mentioned him in a prior podcast. He has got a lot of experience working with Mike Budenholzer. He was even with Budenholzer when he was very successful for the Hawks, but he's been the last 7 seasons, I think, with associate head coach for the Bucks, including when they won the World Championship. So he, I guess, is great developing players, and he has great relationships with his players, and so I think that he was seriously considered for the Wizards job and the Hawks job that Quinn Snyder just got recently. So another name that pops up is Jerry Stackhouse, and Stackhouse is 48. Charles Lee's only 38, but Stackhouse is 48, and he was assistant with the Raptors and the Grizzlies. He also coached the Raptors G League team, and they won the G League championship one year. But he's been at Vanderbilt, the head coach, and he was in 2019. He was SEC Coach of the Year. So obviously he was a former Piston player. He was a really good player, but in my opinion, not knowing and not being in the locker room, but just my observations from watching him play, that he didn't appear to be the most intelligent player. He took bad percentage shots. He made some bad decisions, which doesn't mean that he would be a bad coach. And people do change even who they are, and people are different coaches than they are players. But we traded him for Richard Hamilton, and that kind of ended up helping that team win the championship, I think, partway. Even though Stackhouse, he could score. I think he probably had 50-point games. He could light it up, but he just was, like I said, he didn't appear to be the best coach. But a big name that everybody's talking about, and I've seen all over, is Ime Udoka, and he is only 45. But obviously last year he led the Boston Celtics to the NBA Finals, which was tremendous. But even bigger than that was at around January 1st, they turned into by far the best defensive team in the NBA. They just locked down everybody, and they made, up until that point, they were only about 500. And he had meetings with them, and he changed what the things that they were going to do defensively, and he turned that team around. So obviously, and he was a coach with Coach Popovich. We've talked in prior podcasts about how the Popovich coaching tree is tremendous. So many of the coaches that were coached under him have become very, very successful head coaches in the NBA. It's unbelievable how many he have. But the problem with him, again, is obviously he got suspended from the Celtics for having an affair with an intimate relationship with a staff member in the Celtics organization, which was against their rules. So he was suspended, and now they ended up, I don't know if they technically fired him, but they permanently hired the new coach. So he's gone from there, but it just, even though on paper, as far as being a defensive coach, showing that he's had huge success in just 1 year in the NBA, and he's at a good age, but I know Troy Weaver, he always says he hires the person ahead of the player. The player's personality and their what they're like as a person is more important than how talented they are. And I wonder if that would be the same with a head coach. So we'd have to see. I'm sure that Troy would meet with him. I'm sure that Troy would do all the background checks and come to some conclusion there. But again, he would be the perfect fit. But of course, he wouldn't be available if he hadn't had that inappropriate, intimate relationship. So we'll see what happens there. Kevin Ollie was the former NBA player. He wasn't a great player, but he was a good player. But he he coached the UConn, and they won the championship, the national championship in 2014. And I can't remember what the circumstances, but it was kind of a little bit controversial. I kind of remember at the time that UConn let him go, even though he was a UConn player. But he's 50 years old, and he has been the head of Overtime Elite, which that's the program where the Thompson twins are part of, and their purpose is developing players, young players, into NBA athletes. So that's what they do, 24/7, and he's the head of that. And so I guess that lets you know that he is really involved with developing players, and so that's a good sign for our young players. I'm not sure that that would be my choice, that he would be. I don't think it would be, but he's another name that is out there. So I had mentioned Becky Hammond, that I still believe would be a great coach. Woj didn't mention her in this list, but she has been interviewed for several head coaching jobs in the NBA and hasn't got them. But obviously she's a woman, but she was with Popovich. She was his right-hand person for quite a while. And she was, led their G League team, was their head coach of the G League team, or not G League team, excuse me, their Summer League team, and they won the Summer League championship. She also, this past summer, was the head coach in the WNBA of Las Vegas, and they won the World Championship. So she's had nothing but success, and the players, including Tim Duncan, I've heard him talk about her and how great she was. I've also mentioned Johnny Bryant, and he wasn't on the list either. And Johnny Bryant is the associate head coach for the New York Knicks. So he's helped develop players at Utah when Donovan Mitchell was there and a bunch of those young guys and Bogey. And so he's been big into that. And he's been worked as an assistant under Quinn Snyder. And Quinn Snyder's a great offensive mind, especially, and a very successful coach. They had the best record in the league a couple years. And now he's with the Knicks, and the Knicks are experiencing success. And but he's with Tom Thibodeau, and Thibodeau is one of the best defensive coaches in the league. So we have a lot of work to do, Troy Weaver, and we just got to follow. It's going to be interesting how much leaks out about all these. That's lots of people. I'm sure there's other people that are going to be considered, and some of them I'm sure probably won't get too serious a consideration. But I just really think that with all the talent that we have, again, some people get lucky and even, they fall into jobs and they get a reputation as being a great coach. And then they get respect that way. And, and then, when you're Coach Casey and you've coached these same guys for 2 or 3 years, and you come into the locker room and you say the same things time after time, and there are no results, or you keep on losing, like the Pistons, won 17 games this year. And hats off to the Pistons for beating the Pacers, so they didn't tie for the worst record in league history. But Phil Jackson, he took over right when Michael Jordan was hitting his prime, and Scottie Pippen, they just got him into the program, and so he got there at a good time. And I'm not saying that Phil Jackson is not a great coach. Obviously, he's one of the greatest coaches ever, but he stepped into a great situation. Well, Coach Casey had the opposite situation, but just like Phil Jackson, so he had a lot of credibility with everything that he said. So he could get guys on the Bulls because they were winning and they won championships. They would read these books that he would, prescribe to them. And so then he gets to go on and get the job at the Lakers. And who did they have? Shaq and Kobe. And so, but he had that street cred where the players would believe what he said. And so sometimes I believe even if you don't send the right message or have the right strategy, if your players believe in you, you're going to be more successful than a smarter coach that knows more. So, but yeah, I think that it's good to get somebody in there, and I think the trend is that you see a lot of in NFL and NBA where they're hiring these younger coaches, and I'm an older coach, and I still have the passion, just like Coach Casey. I still have a lot of basketball in me and a lot of passion left in me to coach, And that doesn't mean just because you're in Tom Izzo, he's my age and he still has the fire inside him. But anyway, I will keep quit rambling about these coaches, but I do think that it's a big step. I think it is an important part of our journey going forward into developing a team that's going to be consistently in the playoffs, not next year probably, but after that, that we'll consistently be fighting in the playoffs. And I think that we need another coach. I think it's going to bring a lot of excitement and a new voice. And I think this was a necessary step to getting us to do that. Like I said, I think we're going to improve 15 to 20 games next year, and I thought it was important that we get a new coach to be part of that. So if you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and leave a thumbs up. If you're listening on Spotify, leave a 5-star review. Do something nice for somebody today. If you know somebody that's sick or needs a little bit of help in hand, go out of your way to give them some help, and go Pistons.